I call firstly Karen Adam to be followed by Russell Finlay for around 6 minutes. Ms Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to first recognise everyone who has unduly suffered mentally or physically, and those who have tragically died because of substance misuse or unsafe drug consumption. Every death attributed to unsafe drug consumption at the moment is an absolute tragedy for families losing their loved ones. The current level of harm being experienced by people who consume drugs calls on radical change in how we tackle this going forward. I say that as someone who has experienced my own friends and loved ones appearing in Scotland's drug death figures. For decades, successive UK governments have made a concerted effort to continue their so-called war on drugs, with grave human cost and huge expense to the legal system, the everyday taxpayer and our society. Of course, in dealing with see how I get through, maybe at the end. Of course, in dealing with substantive policy, we must take a cautious yet research-based approach. We also owe it to you all, the people living in Scotland, to explore all options at our disposal to reduce harm in our society. That's why we mustn't shy away from creating a national conversation on how to exactly do that, because change is needed as a matter of urgency. The UK Government needs to give serious consideration to radical reform of drug laws. After their decades-long failed war on drugs, to rule this out without due consideration would be a serious disservice, driven only by ideology rather than proper research and evidence. There are plenty of international examples out there that evidence that decriminalisation or legalisation and regulation is successful in reducing drug deaths and harm. There's more than one incentive to be explored for that potential. For example, organised crime groups would no longer thrive off of the proceeds from illicit drug industry, proceeds of which is often used to fund other criminal operations, such as human trafficking. Maybe at the end, I'll see how we get on. Thank you. Drug reform must be about taking a realistic and common-sense approach. We in Scotland are trying to forge a different path from the one being forged by the government south of the border. Like other countries with common-sense drug policies, Scotland has taken a public health approach to tackling this issue. Under the guidance of Angela Constance and within the limitations of devolution, this SNP Scottish Government has taken its responsibility on reform seriously by setting out a national mission to improve lives and save lives, committed an additional £250 million over the next 5 years to increase access to services for people affected by drug addiction, and exploring the need for safe consumption rooms for people who use drugs. It's not just a pity that we don't have the same level of commitment for Scotland from the Government in Westminster. It's an absolute disgrace. It's long been observed by clinicians that social determinants of health tip the scales against people who are addicted to substances, and the already daunting quest to recover from any type of addiction. And to be clear, when I talk about social determinants of health, the World Health Organization define this as the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work and age. These circumstances are shaped by the distribution of money, power and resources at global, national and local levels. We already know that the cost of living crisis will do untold harm to just about all of us who have less than they do. But make no mistake, this will also have a wide and long-lasting impact when it comes to health outcomes and substance misuse issues. To tackle this issue, Scotland needs the full and comprehensive powers over drug reform in our Parliament. Perhaps a quicker fix to this is Scotland gaining its independence. Cue groans. Mitigating the worst of bad UK government policies should be a thing of the past, and their current policy on drugs inadequate. Stigma and criminalisation suppress the potential for future rehabilitation, harming an individual's employment prospects, and often leads to the continuation of generational cycles of poverty and adverse childhood experiences. Penalties related to drug consumption shouldn't be more damaging to an individual than the consumption of the drug itself. The picture of drug harm in Scotland is different than that one of south of the border. That's why it's so important that we in Scotland have full powers over our own destiny, to ensure our government, our laws, our customs and our values are reflective of the people who choose to live here. The UK Government continuing to cling to powers that should be in the remit of the Scottish Parliament just isn't ineffective. I'm speaking fast, so I've got time to take us in. Their policy isn't ineffective, but it is actually damaging. However, Scotland is a progressive nation brimming with innovation and confidence in our role in the world. On matters devolved, we are at the forefront of tackling some of the biggest issues in the 21st century. As we look to the future, fantastic work is already underway to make positive change. Perhaps someday soon, with the full powers in our own destiny, Scotland can join other progressive nations that have been able to radically decrease the rate of harm caused by unsafe consumption of illicit substances. Change is needed, and I've got 30 seconds to take an intervention.
Jamie Green.
I'm quite depressed at the tone of that contribution. I hope the member will reflect on the language being used in a very sensitive subject. The idea that Scotland has a drug death rate 3.5 times the rest of the UK, including areas that suffer from far more deprivation in many parts of Scotland, no member of the government benches has been willing to admit that, to accept it, to acknowledge it, or even to explain it, which is surely what they should be doing.
Karen Adam, and I can give you the time
What
back.
I would say to the member is, I don't know why he's asking me to reflect on my tone. I think that was uncalled for. But in terms of reflecting on this bespoke issues to Scotland, that is exactly why we need powers here. Obviously, a UK-wide approach is not working for Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Adam. I now